All right. Welcome everybody for another super live episode of PinTech Live. I am joined with some of the awesome INDISC tournament techs. It Never Drains in Southern California is one of the largest and most prestigious pinball tournaments with well over 300 plus tournament players playing for 4 days straight. This tournament series has been going on since, I want to say, like 2013 or 14, right? Somewhere
2012, I think. Yeah.
12.
Started
And
2012 in a
yeah,
bar in Riverside. Yeah.
nice. And it's moved from there to several different places, including the Museum of Pinball, rest in peace. And now we're at the Riverside Convention Center in Riverside, California. So joining me is, right above me, is Jay Collins. He's one of the master techs for the tournament, leading the crew fearlessly through the trenches. And then we'll talk all about those stories. And then we have David Valansky on the lower. You know him as Grumpy EM Doctor. David comes and does lots of stuff with PinTech Live as well, teaching us how to read schematics and how to work on these old but precious games. And then right above David is David Hill, another amazing tech from the San Diego area that's been working with the show for a long time. And then next to him is Matthew Talley from Lynn's Arcade, who travels around with us and helps do tech training at pinball shows with us, and of course is hanging out in his arcade. So all of y'all banded together to keep all these games running. But before we get started into all of that, let's give a shout out to all the other techs that helped volunteer their time to keep these 80 plus pinball machines running
I
throughout the
think,
event.
yeah, I think it was for the actual tournaments, we had maybe like 77 or 78 games. But we
Yeah,
started
that's
with, we
right.
ended up losing like one or two of those, but over the course of the event, but nothing major, thankfully. So,
Yeah. So Jim Belcito, legendary tech and tournament director, and then who else did we have on the team?
oh,
Chuck,
Chuck
I
Casey.
uh,
Chuck
yeah,
Chuck
Casey.
Casey, Bill Ung,
Hans, Bill Ung, yeah.
Oh,
Hans Billberger.
Hans.
Yeah,
Hans,
Yeah.
yeah.
and there's probably now
Helped.
someone I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, there's
I mean, Lars
I'm
came out
trying
and
to,
worked with Hans,
Oh,
okay.
his
nice.
son.
Pinbug.
Oh
Forget his
yeah,
name.
yeah. But yeah, that was we have help, lots of help, thankfully. And yeah, everybody comes and does a great job, and we bust tail for 4 days, and then some of
Yeah,
us bust
it's
tail for days before and after, but yeah.
right. So, I think it was Matthew, your first time doing the volunteer teching for this tournament last year. And I remember coming off of that show, and he was like, that was the most exciting thing ever. It was so hard and difficult, and my brain hurts, but let's do it again next year.
Yeah, for
Because you guys
sure. It
are,
was it's a, it's different. Like when you're in that mode, for sure. It's like I tournament tech at Lynn's all the time, but this is like a scale that's 10 times the size of any tournament that we've ever thrown. And to have those players from all over the world that are like top, it's like all the top 100 players are there, and they're like watching you, being like, "Hurry up and fix this thing, man! I'm trying to get a card in." It's like,
right, because
but it's
y'all are working on the games in real time during gameplay a lot of the times, right?
Yeah, let's explain what get a card in means. People might be here who aren't familiar with tournament formats, and I'm not all that familiar actually.
Yeah, well,
But
explain
there
how this
are,
works.
there are lineups of games in different tournaments that are going on, and especially in the beginning, people are trying to qualify. Actually, well, there's qualification going on all the time. So there's these virtual queues. People are waiting to play a game, a single player game, and if a game goes down for if we need to fix a game, all those queues just they sit idle. No one's getting on. I mean, you might be waiting an hour to play a game, and now we're going to add 20 minutes to it or 15 or whatever. And sometimes I mean, I find the most challenging ones, someone's in the middle of a game.
Yeah.
They
Right.
might have trapped a ball on the flipper and said, it's not doing this thing. And then, you check with officials and say, well, what are we going to do? And they're like, can you fix it without changing the state of the game? If you score something, we could subtract that out. I mean, one of the story I'll tell is about a situation just like that. And you're like, fix the game without changing anything. It's like, but that's what you try to do. I mean, hopefully, different problems can be dealt with that way. If you have a flipper problem, yeah, you might be able to do that. But we'll get into some of the stories, but that's not something I work on when I'm shopping out a game in the workshop, or I'm regularly at the Pacific Pinball Museum in Alameda. We're there when we're closed. We're fixing the games and the things that broke over the course of the week. There's a bunch of us there. We can consult with each other. We can go get parts. And when you're in this site at this place, everything's a rush. Jay brings tons of parts, and yet you might not have the one you need. And then you're thinking, well, can we fix it anyway? What can we do?
Yeah.
And there's all that going on, and all of it happens with people waiting, possibly holding a flipper
staring at you.
Yeah.
Well, and then people playing games next to you, so you're trying not to shine lights like in people's game queues, and it's like, I'm
wearing a headlamp when I'm working on anything, and I've done this for a few years now, and you kind of learn you never look up, because all you have to do is that, and you've shined it in someone's face. And I think I used to get more comments. I don't know if people are just quieter about their comments, or maybe I learned to stop looking up. But I wonder if people think I'm just being rude. But no, you can't look away. And you remember to turn the lamp off, and
don't even use one these days, just because it's too easy to just screw something up messing around with the headlamp too much. So I use my phone where I can and try and do the best I can with the light that's available. But yeah, there's also, interestingly, additional jeopardy with IFPA rules about games going down on qualification events. So if you lose a game in the middle of an event, it has to be available for a certain period of time for the total qualification hours. Otherwise, all the players that played that game prior to that have to go back and replay a game so they can complete the card that the game was removed from. And so, it's a lot. So keeping a game running is
did we do any of that?
We did not. We didn't lose a single game this year, which is great.
Yay, congratulations.
Not in open. We only lost. The only games we lost were on the first day during Classics Target Match Play. We took out a couple of games and said we're just not gonna. These are gonna continue to probably be a problem.
And in that situation, it doesn't matter. That match completed, and
right.
Maybe we should talk about the lineups a little bit so people know that too.
So INDISC is a multi-day event. Starts on Thursday, ends on Sunday. Thursday there is a separate tournament from the qualification events called Classics Target Match Play. It's a match play qualifying tournament. Qualifying happens only on Thursday, with finals played on Friday. At least this year we did it that way, and so we carry 120 people for Classics Target Match Play, which means we need 30 games for every round that's generated, right? So that's 34 player games, 120 people. So we brought 45 or 46 games, something like that, for Classics Target Match Play this year. So when it became pretty clear early on Thursday that there was going to be a few games that were going to be problematic, we made the decision to just remove them from that event, and we still have plenty of backups for every round. And then if we have to when there's problems on Thursday during that event, we can take a game out for the next round, and so it just doesn't get drawn. No groups go play it. And then we have, however long that round is, maybe 30 or 40 minutes to go work on that game. Maybe we need 2 rounds worth of time or whatever it might be. And so it's a little less intense as long as you have plenty of games. If you don't have plenty of games, then you run into the problem where you might have to double dip on a game. So if we ever had like 29 games for a round, that would be a problem. But thankfully this year, the only games we lost were kind of early on Thursday, we were able to keep everything else running or repaired in plenty of time to keep using it for the rest of the event this year. So we have lost a game, here and there over the years that, it just happens. What are you going to do? Like the whole motherboard decides to eat itself, and you just, it's not a lot you can do. We will do some board repairs on site, but we're not bringing equipment for all that, and we don't have spares for everything. And
so Jay, that covers the classics, and there were sort of 2 lineups of classics games. There was some adjustment going on. I think you had to mute. Some adjustment going on from Thursday to Friday to kind of make one classics row that was going to be used for classics final, and I can't remember how the other one got used. But then there's also a lineup of games for the Open, where people are qualifying all weekend long, and then the finals are on Sunday. That's a separate lineup.
Right.
And then there's a separate lineup for high stakes, which
right.
we can that
and
completes very late
also.
on Sunday.
Yeah.
And then a lineup for women that is reused for a kids tournament later, and then reused for a little volunteers
side tournament,
special little tournament that
Oh,
happens
good
on
God,
Sunday.
yeah.
So all these games are, and when you get called to go work on a game, you have to think about, is it part of this kind of tournament that's going on right now, or that kind? Because, if it's during the match play and you can just wait till the next match and then spend your 30 minutes on it, that's a great relief. You can kind of take your time a little bit.
Right.
Whereas, if it's in the open lineup and there are people in queues all weekend waiting to play that game, when you take it down for ideally like a very short period of time, people are waiting, and at some point it's too long. You just have to
they've been
make the
waiting
call.
for the long queue to begin
Already,
with, just because everyone's trying to qualify. And those games since Thursday at 10 a.m. when y'all opened, every game was being played all day long until like 11 or midnight each night.
It's like 13 hours
all the way
straight.
through Sunday.
11,
so
yeah.
you do all
10
the
to 11.
prepping and stuff. I imagine like several months ahead of time of picking games, making sure they're running smooth, doing whatever flipper rebuilds and kind of stuff like that. Can you talk about that? What is like the pre-production look like to get ready for a tournament this big? And then also what you do the days before when you actually get the games in location, like with y'all's check sheet and everything like that.
So for pre-production, we start, probably 8 or 9 months out, I would say, so we're not right now, we're probably taking a little bit of a break for the next 2 or 3 months and doing, dealing with post-event admin stuff. And then we'll start thinking about what's going to happen next year in terms of which games will be used. And then, for the most part, Jim will identify the games that he'll want to use for the Open, and then we'll kind of backfill from there for the other events based on what we know we have that works already, what made it through the event and doesn't need work, or what we can identify as being like, okay, this was solid, and it's playing well. We can kind of fold that one up and then wait until the event to make sure it's still in good shape. Or or before the event when we get everything down, put everything on legs, and then we check everything again. In the meantime, the newer games we want to use, they'll get a general shop out, typically fresh rubber, fix anything, if there's broken plastics, stuff like that. Make sure that all that's good, solid. Rebuild flippers as needed. For the most part, it's almost always needed if the game's not been used before, especially. And general maintenance. We do there's a lot of extra maintenance especially for the Open games. The Open is that's the World Championship. A lot of extra work to make sure that pop bumpers are really strong, slingshots are like firing like crazy, to make sure the games are tip top, fast, hard, those types of things. And then leading up to the event, that's kind of it, just making sure things are shopped out, play testing, everything as much as we can. And then we bring stuff into the building, and then we kind of do that all again, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty nuts. I mean, it's 2 days of setup, and most of the day Tuesday is just moving, 80 games in and getting them into position. And then, if things go well, you definitely spend time Tuesday starting to play test things, clean all the games. We make sure every game gets kind of, gets a good, play field clean. Sometimes we wax stuff depending. But doing less waxing these days because it kind of just wears off in a few hours, like of constant
Because it's
play,
so
and then it
much.
doesn't, you know what I mean? And so what do yeah. So waxing games, it
But
makes them, it
It's like
definitely makes them
idiot
harder and
time.
faster. But
but
yeah,
things that are also done during a regular show. I mean, they all get leveled,
they
but
do,
you've
yeah, every
also
single
got
one, yeah.
rubber under each leveler
Yep,
because the game
rubber
shouldn't get
feet.
moved around too
Right.
much. There's tape on the floor noting where each leg is supposed to be.
Yep.
So the games don't get moved around, or they can be moved back into
Yeah.
position. So there
Oh,
are
absolutely,
extra
yeah.
steps. There's also tape on the floor to keep people away from players when they're playing. Kind of gives us a little bit of a path to get to
Yeah.
the game because there could be
Room
crowds
for the
around.
scorekeepers and the techs, yeah.
Games do get spread out more than at most shows you would go to. Typically, we can squeeze in between the games. I have to squeeze between. These guys fit. We go between the games. The Open is even more spread out. You really can get into those games. Some of the games in the Open have a camera over them all the time. And in previous years, they've all had a camera. Well, you go to raise the play field. If I need to put it all the way up, the camera's in the way. Now we got to move cameras and all that. So these extra layers that happen during a tournament are all a part of it, and all part of that setup too. I mean, there's a whole other crew setting up infrastructure, doing like check-in desk and all the computer systems for that, the streaming rig and all the streaming equipment is being set up at the same time. So there's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, I see the games coming in. Thankfully, I'm not doing too much of that kind of setup stuff. But this year I showed up Thursday late morning, maybe midday, and I already had a list of these are the things to kind of work on. I didn't say I go to INDISC primarily to focus on the electromechanical games, and so I kind of just I'll stay focused on those, make sure we have schematics for everything. And over the years, the games get better and better. It's the same,
Right.
if the same game is coming back, we're not as worried about it. Jay did a wonderful job getting OXO ready. I mean, OXO showed up. I think there was one question still when it showed up. It turned out to be a pretty quick fix. And then I think that game held up really well.
Pretty well,
I mean,
yeah.
it didn't
nice,
need,
yeah.
I don't remember having to go into it. But that's the kind of, I don't know how many hours you put in on that. I know that had just been
Too
sitting
many
up
for
on a
the few
shelf
things I
for-
fixed. Probably,
but that's a game that had just sat on a shelf for years.
Right.
It wasn't, you got it ready for the tournament. But in past years, we've had, I don't know what other format you guys use, but for electromechanicals, Jim would host a weekend at his shop, and people from all over Southern California, people who got to know each other at the Museum of Pinball in Banning, they would sort of reconvene and swoop in and work on all these games. And I went out for some of those.
Right.
And I guess it's kind of nice to be in the mode now where the games are primarily done, and they just kind of get tuned up each year, or they keep going.
Right.
But yeah, I know, Jay, you had to work on OXO, and probably I don't think there was another new EM.
Blue Chip.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which pretty much worked for the most part when I picked that up for the event. But we did, that I shopped that out, did some tweaks just to kind of, adjust the playability a little bit and make it play a little harder for the tournament players. But
yeah, Jay and I met many years ago when he wasn't. The lineup was set up for INDISC in Banning, and not knowing what had been done, I came in and I saw a game that wasn't set up, wasn't working correctly, and so I'm making changes to it. And finally, Jay shows up and he's like, "No, we did that those were rule changes," and I think the flippers were kind of dropped down a little bit to make the game a little harder. And
Oh,
so I've
yeah.
kind of learned, okay, this is stuff that's not broken on these games.
It's
Flipper
purposeful.
hop,
Yeah.
ball hop always drives me crazy. When the ball's coming on the in lane and then it jumps as it gets to the flipper, it's easily fixed. It's not fixed on these games. That's part of making it harder. So I've had to learn, like, just leave that stuff alone.
Ball hop drives me crazy too. I've bought many games where I've actually put new holes in play fields to move the guides to eliminate ball hop just because it makes me so crazy. Yeah. But
in a
sometimes,
setting,
for a tournament
helps,
game,
it helps
it can make it harder.
Time. Yeah.
And every single person is going to get frustrated with it. So whatever, it's
right.
like, it's not just the one person that complains. It's like, no, this is for everybody, man. Everybody gets to deal with this.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's another aspect of, things that we do, leading up to INDISC is making game modifications, even beyond just adjusting flippers and maybe, adding ball hop or fixing ball hop or whatever it is. But we'll change, I made a plastic for a game this year to keep for victory, Gottlieb victory, to keep the ball from going into this lane that constantly sends it back to the upper play field over and over again. So when the ball comes out of the upper play field, it hits this plastic and then it bounces into the main play field instead of going into this one scoop repeatedly that would allow you to just play the upper play field the whole time. It's little things like that kind of, you can, you want to think about because, you get a good player on a game like that and they'll just do the same. They'll do one thing over and over again for 2 hours, I mean, I've seen it happen. So
I've had some other modifications. Jim has asked, he gets he gets an EM and turns out it has one set of rules when you set it for add a ball and another set of rules when you set it for novelty. And he said, but I want that other rule, but I want it set to novelty. And so I've had to rewire some of the games in ways that let us sort of have the best of both worlds the way Jim wants it.
And we have some partners in the past that have made custom code for games to have ROMs to put in there for, like, Sorcerer, so eliminated lock stealing, and you had to relight the locks with the upper bank and drop targets and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, we made that change for Sorcerer ROM. We designed that change and actually make that. I think Scott Charles did that for us, and shout out to Scott. Great job. But yeah, we came up with some rules with him, and now Sorcerer gets used a lot because it's so much more fun. Like with the, with the locks just not lit all the time, and it makes it, a valid tournament game across players. People aren't just, stealing the one lock ball all the time and with, one shot into multi-ball kind of stuff. So
I don't know how competitive playing was in the 80s. I'm not sure what vintage that game is, but I mean, what's happening now with tournaments, I mean, a lot of games now have a tournament mode and you can turn that on and it'll equalize things. These games were created at a time when this didn't happen. I mean, you need to have these changes to make the game usable in that format.
Right. And I didn't start doing competitive pinball until around 2010-ish, 2010, 11-ish, I think. I can't remember exactly, but it's been kind of like this since then, or at least been trying to be like this. But I know Jim will sometimes tell stories, from the old days when, he started doing this and everybody would just play the same game. It would be like 27 Twilight Zones or 12 Twilight Zones, all set up, and everybody would line up for the one that they thought was the better one. And so because this one's the high scores are better or it's easier or whatever it is, they like the way that one played better. And so stuff like that kind of is how it used to be, I guess. But
wow,
thankfully, that's not what it's like now.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, he likes to tell stories about when it was, and when it was like when the game that everybody had to play at some tournament was something nobody really wanted to play, So it wasn't Twilight Zone. It was, a really bad Sega or something, or what everybody thought at the time was a really bad Sega. I think nowadays we've kind of reevaluated a lot of these games, and we don't think they're so bad anymore. But at least I don't.
I saw a video of one of those tournaments and it was Lost in Space, and it was 10 Lost in Space side by side. I was like,
why?
Why would you do this?
Because it was a promotion from the manufacturer, basically. It's nothing more really. And there might have been 20 or 30 people competing, maybe 40 or 50. I don't know what the numbers were like back then, but we had 407 players, I think, registered at INDISC that compete across all the competitions. Not everybody played in everything. So the Open was, 360-ish, Classics 343 maybe this year. So if I remember correctly, those numbers give or take a few, I would say.
Right.
But yeah, so big difference. It's competitive pinball has grown by leaps and bounds without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. A lot of people came and looked at that lineup, and y'all did have a really diverse and eclectic lineup of games that many people haven't even seen. Like, for one, like, how many times do you ever see a kingpin in a tournament? And then that was in the main, there's 8 or
Right,
9
yeah.
of those in existence. You have
Yeah,
one
yeah.
in
Jim,
the open.
a friend of his, let him borrow it. Just said, yeah. I guess he
Incredible.
brings it to Extreme every year.
Yeah.
Um, and so Jim asked, would you let us use it for the tournament? He said, sure, I guess. And so, he brought it. We fixed a few things and got it working and playing, and yeah, it was pretty cool. Kingpin's a neat game. I know people have been trying to rebuild it, but hopefully it
It's a
gets
neat
done
game.
because it's a neat game. Yeah, it deserves to be more prevalent. It was, Capcom. I think, I don't know about Big Bang Bar so much, but it seemed like they had some potential to do some cool stuff, and then just didn't work out, I guess. But yeah,
That was a fun mod that you had to figure out on Kingpin on day one, was figuring
oh
out
yeah,
that
Coin Door.
the coin
Yeah.
door mod. And
So
yeah, go for
do you
that.
want me to go? Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
do
Go
tell
it.
the
ahead.
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Okay.
And then while Jay's talking, Matthew, can you bump up your mic a little bit more? You're just a
Yeah.
little soft.
Um, so to get us into the Kingpin discussion, I'll just mention the coin door interlocks, which is most people, if you have a pinball machine, you probably know when you open the coin door, you lose power to the game, the flippers drop, and then you lose your ball or whatever. Some games have a ball saver built in, but not everything does. And so for tournaments, we try and disable the coin door interlocks so that they're always so that when you open the coin door, the flippers don't drop. So if a player has a stuck ball or they've trapped up because there's a game issue, they're trying to get a tech or tournament director over to take a look at it. We can open the game up, take the ball out. They're still, on ball 2 with whatever points they had, and we can see what we can do for the problem. So disabling
And
coin
and
door interlock
we should
switches is,
say, I
is a
mean,
big deal.
a stuck ball gets moved onto a held flipper, so you need
It
the
does,
power to
right?
be on,
Yes,
even if
yes,
there's
yeah,
just a stuck ball.
right.
You need power to work when you open the
Right.
game. Yeah.
Exactly. So, Stern, Williams, WPC games, we're pretty familiar with the coin door switches, and we have some 3D printed brackets that kind of we can put in some of the games that'll keep the switches closed. Otherwise, we'll do things like tape them off, or you can sometimes use a rubber ring, like a flipper rubber, an old one or whatever, around the switch, and that just keeps the switch held in. But Kingpin has an interesting scenario where the one of the switches has to be pushed in or out. Well, I can't remember exactly which way it was, but it was one of the ways. It's either in or out in order to be able to go into the settings and do anything. So if you want to do a switch test or anything like that while the game is going, you have to, the switch has to be in a certain position. So opening the coin door has 2 switches, one for this settings thing and then one for the actual power. So and the positions needed to be opposite one another for it to work for us. So we had to have one closed and one open, or one open and one closed, or something. So what we ended up having to do on Kingpin, this crazy rare game, is actually unplug the switch so we could get into the settings, and then I made a little jumper with alligator clips so we could clip the switch closed and then unclip the switch to be able to use it in the settings while still maintaining the power to the game while it was on, so we could get out stuck balls and then or do a switch test and figure out what's working or not working, basically manually while having the coin door open. Otherwise there'd be no way to do either of those things. So yeah, fun stuff. So that was
One
one
of
of the
the
first things
best.
we figured out pretty quick on, I think was that Thursday or Friday?
That was Thursday. Yeah.
Thursday, yeah.
And it was funny was because we didn't have any alligator clips. And
No, yeah.
so Jay's sitting there and he's like, I have an idea. And he just bails. And I was like, where did he go? So I ran over and I followed him, and he's got, what did you grab? It was the
So
light. It was like the clips for the lights on a pin.
I wish you guys had come to me. I always have like 4 or 5 with me. Always.
Well, so here's the deal, though. We basically needed to cannibalize them, and I don't want to cannibalize your alligator clips, really. So we put trough lights in a lot of games that we use, because we also INDISC, also the same group that runs INDISC, also runs Pinball at the Lab, which is usually in September every year, which is another match play tournament. And the lighting and at Pinball, it's a public arcade, so it tends to be kind of dark, and so we add some lighting mods to the games we use for that stuff. So I have all these like trough lighting kits, and they come with different connections. You know, Comet sends you the little LED strip, and then you get the connections for for hooking it up with an alligator clip, or you can hook it up to actually plug in a lamp socket or whatever. There's a bunch of different ways you can plug it all in. So I usually end up soldering them to a lamp socket so they don't come unplugged. And then but I keep all the parts. So I just realized I have bags full of like alligator clips, but none of them are connected to one another. So I just pulled 2 of them out, soldered them together, and made like a little jumper connector. Yeah. So just happened to have them sitting in a bin. That's why I save everything. It's, like hoarding things. It's not great, but you never know, man.
But if it's useful, it's not hoarding
You never
at that
know.
point.
Right.
Yeah, that was a rad one. I like that fix. That was fun.
Yeah, so it's like inevitably as much pre-production as you do in prepping these games, it's pinball, right? So they're gonna somehow work themselves apart.
Good players find a way. It just doesn't even. You get a good player on a game, and they'll find something broken, or they will find a way to break something that was working. They just do. I don't know why or how. I'm probably guilty of that to some degree, I suppose, but yeah, it's pretty nutty. So, all the things that seem like they're working perfectly, you can play test for an hour, you can play test for 5 hours, but once you get, good players playing all day, just stuff breaks, just happens. And a lot of the games are old, man. I mean, probably the vast majority of the stuff that we're actually using for tournaments is 30 or 40 years old at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, like the actual numbers of games that we're using that were made in the 2000s is a pretty small percentage. So, of the whole.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say particularly for INDISC because of the classics lineup and Jim's collection and your collection and
and in INDISC has just one of the one of Jim's things, something that he really cares about is finding out who's good on all the pinball, not just whatever's the latest pinball, right? And that's fine too. Those are all valid choices, but INDISC in particular just happens to be kind of one of the tenets of the event, and it has been since the very first event in 2012, helping with INDISC back then. But I've known Jim since then, and he's always wanted to use stuff that was different or unusual or that you didn't see very often, and find a way to make it work and make it playable if it wouldn't otherwise be playable, and expose tournament players to a variety of different things and challenges. Gottlieb flippers feel different.
How many games were in the Open? How many total games in the Open?
21 this year, maybe.
21.
I'm not exactly
like,
sure, but
I think there were two Stearns and one Jersey Jack, and those were like the 3 most modern.
2 Stearns, Jersey Jack. We had Labyrinth
and Galactic.
Yeah, Galactic Tank Force. So there's and then some was there. Yeah, maybe I don't remember all the games, but yeah, and then some 90s stuff from Williams, and then some more. We got a few Gottliebs. Yeah,
Gottlieb's and a Sega
about a Gottlieb.
Yeah, 2 Segas.
I was pretty proud of all the. It was like each lineup had a 6803.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite.
Oh, did it? What does that? Was that
like,
true?
The classics had Lady Luck and 8 Ball
Lady Luck.
Champ.
Yeah, 8 Ball Champ.
And
Yeah.
then,
What was the
main
6803?
had Escape from Lost World.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
right. That is a
High Stakes
6803.
had
Beat the Clock.
Beat the Clock.
Beat the
And
Clock.
everyone was avoiding playing
Is-
Beat the Clock. I'm like, you guys should play this game.
Is
It's
Beat
so
the
fun. They're
Clock
like,
a
I don't know how to play
6803?
this game.
Yeah.
I can't.
Like the top
Is it?
players that
Yeah.
are playing at High Stakes are like, I don't know how to play this game. I'm not going after that one.
Beat-
I'm gonna
Beat the
stick to
Clock
Iron
is
Maiden that I can blow
fantastic.
up.
It's a great game.
Great game. Yeah. Really great game. Like super unusual. A friend of mine, actually, one of our league guys, found one like locally, brought it to me to kind of do a bunch of work on, get it up and running. And I was having so much fun playing it. I was kind of sad when he came to pick it back up. But yeah, really cool game. Don't see it very often.
No.
Unfortunately, you can't use it in pinball tournaments because, well, you can, but IFPA deems Beat the Clock to be a single ball game because it's a time-based game, and so it doesn't count fully as a 3-ball game, and there's some rules around,
TGP and stuff.
they call it TGP, total games played, and so people don't use Beat the Clock in tournaments because it affects the overall point value of an event if you use Beat the Clock versus another 3-ball game. But I mean, I would disagree that Beat the Clock is really a 1-ball game, even though it's a time game. You can get 20 balls,
totally.
and beat the clock. It's if you and you can earn them by hitting things, right? You can earn more time. So you're skillfully adding length to your game, not just playing for 2 minutes and being done. So, but yeah, that's a nit to pick, I suppose. But yeah, not for me to decide. But yeah,
it's
so
not my job.
High Stakes was non-IFPA this year for other reasons, and for time, mostly just for time reasons, and so Jim decided he was going to use Beat the Clock because there was going to be no penalty for doing so. He could make his own rules if it's not IFPA. So yeah, but great game. And I don't remember it breaking down, which is also
I didn't
cool.
either. Yeah, I think it was on the whole time.
Yeah, but you said people weren't playing it.
Well, I mean, they started playing it.
I know.
Eventually, but yeah.
Yeah, I had to put a new coil in in the right flipper.
Oh, okay. So melted the coil. There you go. Everything breaks.
Nothing's safe. I'd love to just go to start off, let's just go one by one. And what was your most difficult and treacherous fix that you did on that weekend?
Let's see.
Whoever wants to go first.
Didn't categorize by treacherous. I mean, I was going to kick us off with a little.
Victorious too.
Well, there was different categories of problems that are different challenge levels. So, like when a game doesn't do something it's supposed to do, that's pretty easy. You're looking for some broken wire, switch not closing, whatever. Then when it does something when it shouldn't be doing it, okay, you might have a short, you might have something else, but then there are times that a game does something it just could never possibly do. And that's one where you're like, oh my God, okay, this could take hours. I'm trying to remember if I particularly had exactly that and what we got into. And then the intermittent problems. I mean, these are the top players in the world. They tell you it did something. It did it. It might have even been on camera. And I look at the game, I go, that's impossible. There's no combination of events that's going to lead to that. So I can't necessarily say that I can categorize each thing I had into something like that. But I don't know if you guys feel the same way. I mean, it just seemed like everything someone would come to me with, I'm just like, that's not possible. How? Like, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I think we solved everything for the most part, but yeah. It was that I think about that and I'm just like, why can't they just tell me this target isn't scoring or something like that? I could deal with that. So,
right.
I mean, I'll start with a quick story, and I want to make sure we get David Hill on because I know he has to leave a little early and he's probably got some stories. But This was Abracadabra during Classics Finals. It's a one-player game, so they're playing it, one person at a time, but it's also on the live stream. So the streaming rig is all there. They've all been playing it, and they call me over. The flippers are causing 500 points to score, and it's an intermittent problem, but it's happening often enough that it's. I wouldn't categorize it like that. We never know when it's going to happen. I have one of those to talk about later. So, they want to try to sort of halt the play at the moment. The player's not holding the ball on a flipper or anything, but they are in the middle of a game, and they want me to find the switch that's closing when the flippers are being flipped and not change game state. I mean, if there's scoring that happens, that's okay. We can subtract out that score. And really, the weird thing on EMs, though, I guess this is sort of IFPA rules or whoever. I don't know whose rules it is. Putting the game back in the right state is not that difficult on an EM. I think on some solid state games, it would be very hard to undo something. But I mean, if I hit a switch by accident, I can undo that. In any case, game scoring 500 points. Great. And everyone's in a hurry, and the stream is waiting. The players are waiting. There isn't a whole bunch else going on at that moment. Okay, it's not a complicated play field. There are eight lanes that score 500 points, and the 10 drop targets score 500 points. So I look at all those switches. One lane looked a little close, but it actually was an objective lane that hadn't been hit, so it couldn't be that one. And now I'm just like, okay, I've looked at the switches. You can look at the switch tabs. You look at the wires. I can't find it. Now I can pull up a schematic. We'll see if we have time for that. It might not be worth it now. But at some point, they're like, okay, this is taking too long. I don't know if it had been 2-3 minutes. Also, I've asked them to move the streaming rig because I got to raise the play field and look. And I didn't really want to be on camera doing all this. And I look on the schematic, and for some reason, the out lanes, which score the bonus. Now, on that game, it's a progressive bonus. It's either 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 points. It's never 500 points. But these out lanes are wired with a 3-leaf switch. It's like a make. All three come together. And it turns out the bottom two, if they come together on their own, which never happens when you're playing the game, that scores 500 points. And one or both of those were very close. So I was able to adjust that. And then, now they've already moved on to another game. So Abracadabra won't have that problem next year. I don't even know if it got used again this year. But it was interesting because if I hadn't looked on the schematic, why would I have ever looked at these switches or thought that? So that for me, that was kind of an interesting takeaway. Like, game scoring 500 points randomly, it's nothing on the playfield labeled 500 points.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Crazy. And try to find that while people are waiting.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I tell them to move on, and I look at the schematic, and probably a minute later, it's fixed. But who knows? It's going to be another minute. Okay. So
yeah, to try to search that out, it's like, forget it.
I'll say that's my first story.
How about you, David? You got a good story for us?
My best was probably total nuclear annihilation. So we got a report that one of the top lanes wasn't working. So went over, get the game opened up, put in a switch test, and sure enough, two of the lanes at the top aren't registering.
Are they in the middle of a game?
No, it was somebody had finished and they reported it, so I was able to.
Which lineup was this? In the open?
Women's.
Women's. Okay.
Yeah.
So we get it open, and I start poking at it, and sure enough, they're not registering. Start looking at stuff, and then switch is physically intact. It seems to be working. I trace the wires back, and TNA was built. It started as somebody's private project before it got bought up and mass produced, and it uses a lot of multimorphic parts. So there's a multimorphic 16-channel switch PCB on there that the wires run into. And sure enough, I look at it, and two of the diodes, surface mount diodes, are just gone. And it's like magnify it on the phone, take a picture, and like, oh yeah, they're definitely gone.
Are they fried or
Like
missing?
exploded?
Missing. Missing.
should.
I have a picture if you
They
want to
don't
see
exist,
it.
but they should.
Oh
They
my
should.
God.
And under magnification with my iPhone, you can see where one of the pads is like ripped off, and it either got scraped by a tool or just getting old or hot or something like that. But pull the board out, and Jay was able to put some new diodes, hack them onto the board. Like he said, we don't plan to do board repair there, but Jay did a board repair there and put it back in.
Surface mount board repair. Like,
yes.
is it
Well,
like you're using tweezers?
He didn't put
No.
surface mount back on there.
Oh, did you
No,
have to
so-
retrofit and put big diodes in?
Well, I used, like I don't know if you, but like a 1N914 or 1N4148, which is a really small signal diode, just a silicon signal diode, like, and they're tiny little glass. I mean, the actual diode itself is a little bit bigger than, a surface mount part, but obviously you have the legs. But what I was able to do is just flip the board over and solder one leg to the input pin, because basically the wire goes through a diode and then to a capacitor just in series. So so I ran the diode across the backside of the board, and then there was actually vias that were connected to in between the capacitor and the diode, the other end of the diode. And so I used those, I scraped the solder mask away from the vias, and then used those as like a little solder pad, because they're a little bit bigger than, or like a little surface mount pad, and then tacked the diodes on the back that way. And so it's not beautiful. And if I was probably repairing it at home, I would just get the right part, and I can do surface mount soldering. It's not much fun. And I failed at one yesterday because I lost the part out of my tweezers, and it's somewhere in my shop, this tiny little part. Yeah, like to try and fix an opto. I was trying to fix an opto on a stern and trying to hold it down so I could resolder this new opto onto this tiny little PCB, and like ping, and so I don't know where that is, but yeah, so you can do that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't be doing it at INDISC for sure. Like, it's just not, it's not practical. But I've got part, we made it work. So, and it'll probably be, and it'll probably work for 25 years that way, to be honest. And somebody else, Jim won't ever sell that game, but if somebody else did end up with the game and they opened it up and be like, what's going on there, they'd take it off and probably see that it had, it was working. So somebody did something. But yeah, it's not, it's not the prettiest way to do things, but
and they'd say,
that's sort of like some of the tournament stuff.
Why did someone do the repair this way? Were they in the middle of a tournament or something?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh yeah, I have a future show that looked like that. That came from Jim's house.
So David, just thinking about that problem though, and when it was reported, the game, those lanes didn't work for a lot of people's games until it got reported, right?
Presumably. Unless it magically failed right then, but either people weren't hitting them or not noticing them, which is more likely, because when people find problems, they tell us.
Yeah.
Sometimes in loud, angry voices, but they tell us.
Yeah.
Missing out on points. Why do you think someone would take out those diodes?
It was probably accidentally fell off, or hit with a tool.
I'm thinking heat.
Probably.
I'll bet they overheated and overheated their pads and melted the solder. I don't know if that can even happen.
With pick and place and oven soldering, especially stuff from China, you just get stuff like that sometimes where the solder doesn't really melt as much as it should or whatever. I mean, that's what I was trying to fix. Exactly the same kind of thing. I literally it was on a Foo Fighters, the opto receiver side board for the fork mech, the little diode receiver it just fell off. The pads were perfectly clean. I mean, it just was gone. The vibration, it just didn't get soldered as well as it needed to be, and ultimately the vibration just wore it away. Until it just poked off. Just so it was gone. It might be in the game somewhere, but this stuff happens. It's and it's harder obviously with surface mount parts to be doing this kind of repair work. It's just not as easy, especially on site. It's not it's not that it's not repairable, because it all is, but it's definitely not as easy to do when you're in the arcade. So
yeah, straight up.
Right. What about you, Matthew? You got a good story?
One of the I was walking up to work on Guardians, and I didn't know it was giving away points. That's all I was told. And luckily, Escher heard it, and Escher comes up to me and he's like, "It's the drop target." I'm like, "It's drop target." He's like, "Mine was doing the same thing." He's like, "It drops down and then it'll score points, and not, no one really notices this little thing just drops down real quick during like right when you start the game." And I was like, "Okay." So I go up and I'm looking at it, and sure enough, it was just you'd hit start and it would just drop down with vibration from like the flippers. It would just drop down. So I lifted it up and looked inside, and it looked like there was the bracket on the inside looked like it needed 2 springs to get it to reset to where the drop target would actually clip to it, and then like you'd hit it down and it wouldn't pull itself back down to get that ledge back up to where that drop target would sit on it. And so I'm looking in the game and there's no extra, stuff going around in there. I was like, usually you find like bits and pieces of like the game, like stuff that's broken off over the time, and I couldn't find anything. And I was like, all right, well, I think it's the spring. And I go over to Jay and I was like, you got one of these, like, it's like a fat short spring. And he's like, no. So I took another spring and just like chopped it up and created one for it on the fly, and just like put that back in there, and then got it to be solid for a long while. And then I guess I heard later on, it was like probably Saturday, it started messing up again. But that was on like Thursday that I did that fix. And then eventually.
Yeah, I think we lost it Saturday night at like 10:15, which is like 45 minutes ago. We're just like, okay,
it's dead.
Well, and it turned out that bracket, the bracket for that drop target had worn significantly. Over years of playing, the actual mech is like, it was like a 1/4 inch
like
worn down into from ever since that game came out. It's just been hitting.
So we got it, or you got it to back for most of the event, which is what we needed it for, and then it just gave up for good after you probably after everybody in the world smashing it for 3 days.
Yeah.
But that was a good one.
That was a fun one.
What was your most intense one, Jay?
I'd probably say we Joker Poker was a kind of a nasty one. We had 2 problems. The pop bumper, one of the pop bumpers wasn't working, and the drop target bank wasn't resetting. On a Joker Poker, which is super important on that game, obviously. And so we started digging in, and Gottlieb used under the playfield pop bumper driver boards. So like the transistor that turns the coil on and off is like this little outboard PCB that was under the playfield, and every pop bumper kind of has its own little driver board. And somebody had replaced both driver boards in this game at some point with newer like repos that technically are probably much better or more durable, but one of them had clearly destroyed itself at some point. But it looked like that somebody had repaired it already, but the board itself was just like covered in like carbon. I mean, it looked like Han Solo, and like like in carbonite. It was like this whole board was just like black. I was just like, what is going on there? And so we pull it out, and I start, I pull the transistor out, I test it, it's failed. I'm like, okay, it's actually a MOSFET. Actually, the new boards use a MOSFET. So so I put a new MOSFET in, put it back in the game, still not working. And so I pull it back out, and I start looking closer at it, and I pull the MOSFET back out, and I've got literally a short on this board. Even without the MOSFET in, something is shorted like on the board across the pins of this MOSFET. So it's never going to work, regardless of whether the part you put in is good. And so, we started cleaning off all that carbon, which I had a pretty good hunch that it was probably conductive, from whatever had blown up on it before. I've never seen a transistor leave that much carbon on a board.
I watched you do this, and when you had that theory, I was like, I don't know. I just like, really, just this black dust. Sure enough, yeah.
Yeah. So, David Volansky keeps a little bottle of alcohol, a little spray bottle of alcohol in his bins. I don't really, it's not something I need very often, so I don't take it with me. I have some, on my bench at home for stuff, but yeah, a little spray bottle, and so we got
And
a
a
little
wire
wire,
brush.
a little brass
Yeah.
wire brush, brass brush, something not too, so it's not so aggressive, and
Don't want to
just
pull up
scrubbed
traces
it.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, just scrubbed it, and it all came up, and I mean the board looked almost like new once we were done, and sure enough, put the MOSFET back in, and the pop bumper worked again. So, and I mean, I mean, it would have had to catastrophically explode apart, and on a brand new Rotten Dog board too, which is just wild to me that could happen, really. But yeah, I've not. I mean, it caught fire, I guess. Like this this the MOSFET to leave that much carbon. I mean, most, I would say like 40% of the board, the whole pop over driver board, which is about 2 by 3 inches, was covered in black. That black carbon material. It was bad. So, and then the
It
same
came
game
totally
at the
clean. It
same
was beautiful
time.
when you were done.
It did, yeah. It came up completely. It took a bit of elbow work, but not too much. And then the same game at the same time had a drop target bank issue, which just ended up being both the driver and the pre-driver on the solenoid board. So we had 2 transistors we had to replace to get that back working, but we fixed that and got that back going. But that was an adventure. So that's the kind of stuff, when you have to pull boards out and you're doing board work on site, it's always a little dicey and kind of, like, am I really going to be able to fix this at this point? I don't have all my favorite tools to maybe, dig into that kind of stuff, but usually a multimeter is all you need. So yeah, and we were able to get there. So that was probably the biggest one I dealt with over the weekend.
Since I'm a big documentation guy, I'm going to point out that with that driver board, you're looking at the manual on your phone.
Yes.
We didn't have a printed manual in the game. And you're looking on your phone and having trouble finding a piece of that documentation. I pull it up on my tablet so I can at least see a bigger piece of it, and was able to put the rest of the piece together. But like, this is why I like the paper in the game.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
for sure.
So at least like for the EMs there, I am always way on top of that ahead of time, making sure we know what's coming, that we have a schematic there and we're ready, because I can pull it up on a screen, but I find it harder to look at on a screen.
I actually have a Bally solenoid, or a Bally power supply board schematic, an MPU schematic, and a solenoid driver board schematic, blueprint sized, right above my desk. I like working on classic Bally's and Stern so much. It's my favorite. They're my favorite games. And so I actually bought a Paragon once that somebody had ordered from Bally. I have the tube. It came from the manufacturer, and there was blueprints of all the schematics for Paragon inside.
Oh my god!
And so, so I still have that in my closet. So a friend of mine who's a Bally collector wanted to make copies, and so he gave me some copies, and I had them framed and put them above my bench.
Are they there for decoration, or do you look at that?
No, I look at them. Yeah, I mean, if
okay.
Like if I'm,
they're big enough that you can read the schematic while you're working.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I also have a computer monitor, right next to me too. I can use, but yeah, if I'm trying to figure out, obviously, like, I might see that Q10 is the right thumper bumper on Paragon. That's not going to do me much good if I'm working on, Lost World or something, right? But it's just general, just a reminder if I need to know, okay, which pin is 5 volts again, or which fuse on the rectifier board is, is for the high voltage. It's just like, oh yeah, right there. It's just above my head. I just look and I see it. And plus there's kind of a cool decoration. So it serves both purposes.
That's so
yeah, having paper is great. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to have the manuals, but we have, with 77 games, that's just never going to happen. Theoretically, realistically, whatever you want to say. Yeah. Unlikely.
Awesome. So, David Volansky, you said you had some show and tell type stories. Do you want to?
Oh, I don't know if I have a show and tell now. Okay. I had my next story wasn't really show and tell. I mean, I could pull a schematic up, but it's almost not necessary for this one. So, Bow and Arrow was was the only electromechanical in the open lineup. So again, this is people in long queues, they're waiting, and this game, let's see, It's been used in tournaments before. So it's, you know, we know kind of what state it's in. It's a little rough on the inside. It's a little rough on the playfield too. But I mean, when you get into it, you're like, wow, I wish I could spend a couple of days, like, you know, getting it more tuned up. But I mean, it worked. It held up. The problem it had was an intermittent problem, but it was one that would repeat infrequently. Ball drain doesn't result in the ball getting kicked out to the shooter lane. And when Jim first told me about it, he said, you know, we had to hit something on the play field to make it come out. And I'm thinking, you just made the motor run. That was my theory. But this didn't happen very often. It's like, so it's an intermittent problem, except every ball ends by draining. You know, it's like, this is going to happen. And what's it going to be? And this game in particular, it's not like other EMs. When the ball goes into the out hole, it doesn't fire the out hole relay. It collects the bonus, and when bonus is done being collected, it fires the out hole relay. And so I'm kind of going. This is even before we've started. So I'm there a few days before, and I hear about this problem, and I'm working on like what could be causing this. I cannot recreate the problem. I don't know how many balls were played, but let's say it fails 1 in 200 times, right? So you have to play 200 balls. You can't, right? It just takes too long. You don't really see the problem. So I hit everything I think it could be. I'm looking at switches and gapping switches and making sure Jones plugs are good. And so I go through a whole bunch of stuff, and I think it still happens a time or two. And then I catch it in the act. Someone calls me over. It hasn't come, and I can see the out hole relay is fired. The armature's pulled in, but the motor hasn't run. And so I know it's got to be the switch on that relay that runs the motor. And we're not in the middle of a game at this point, I think. We must have been. I mean, I know it's easy enough to continue. There was one time I even just opened the coin door, reached in and made the motor turn. It kicks the ball out, and you know, it's safe. The ball's drained. I can do these things, but even just every time you open these games, because I've made this mistake, unfortunately, like when you've touched the door, now you got to close it. You got to make sure you don't press the start button. You got to make sure you don't slam tilt. You got to make sure you get it locked again. We had one game that had like a lock bar that kept coming up, and it was, but you know, that the lock bar wasn't even when you locked it all the way, it would come loose. But it's like everything you touch could become a problem. So just opening the door to turn the motor and not touch anything else and then close the door, that's hard enough. But okay, so we were able to continue that game. I went in, I did work, and when I went to adjust the one switch, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of marginally closing. So I felt pretty good, like we had finally found it. I don't remember what day it was, but I think I come in the next day, and the first ball that drains in that game, it doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a long day. And I don't know. I probably just turned the motor. That might be the time I reached in and turned the motor, and I'm telling everybody else, I got to show you guys what to do. If I'm not here, this is a really easy fix. It's going to happen 5-6 times a day, whatever. It never happened again. But it was very funny. I mean, I finally thought I fixed it. It failed one more time, and then it went the whole weekend, which
For spite. Just one more
Yeah,
time.
just
For
for
spite.
yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
why,
exactly.
but one more time. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. So,
You got me.
but even that one, you know, I didn't start at the out hole relay because there's a whole complex thing that leads to getting from ball drain to going into the shooter lane. And I thought I had looked at everything, and maybe I just missed the one that actually was a problem. Then found it. Then one more spite. Intermittent problem, and then it lasted the rest. And again, like if I don't have to touch a game in the open, that's great, because there's just a lot going on over there. So
It's a little more intense.
It's intense.
Yeah.
More intense.
But I have
Yeah.
to say, I mean, like, I don't, you know, occasionally you can get a player that's a little bit irritable, but it's pretty rare. And I didn't experience it one time this year. I think almost everybody was, you know, understanding and grateful just to have people there fixing stuff. So It's
I
unusual that it happens.
Yeah,
that way, but
I don't think I had anybody get irritated this year. You're right. I've not had people confront me in the past, but I've heard secondhand.
yes,
Someone asked
right.
who I was, whatever, and it was one of those times when like I had opened the door, I was very carefully closing it, and then I hit the start button.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
Gotta
I did that
really
this year
learn. Oh, you did? Okay.
once. Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
thought
I
it
mean,
was
it's
just
just
me.
like no.
Happens.
I slam tilted a game in high stakes because the switch. I mean the I mean I first time I
Yeah.
opened the game. And the switch was, I mean, like, barely any room, and the coin door it has a spot worn out where you can see that for the last 35 years on high speed or 45 years on high speed that the door has been has been tight because the whole corner is shiny silver, like
Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
door goes back in. And so I mean there was no way I was going to get that door closed without slam telling. I mean, it would have been a shocking if it didn't. So obviously now, okay, well, we realize this is a problem and we have to fix it. But so we just disable the slam tilt and it doesn't happen again. But yeah, I mean, it happens. Just it's
Yeah.
pinball. Unfortunately, it's
There was
annoying.
one,
it annoys the players and it annoys me. But
yeah, part of it.
It was
Yeah,
cool
it's
seeing
usually
that when a game was down, and like especially in the open where people were trying to finish their cards and everything. As soon as the game came back, there would be like cheering and clapping, and then people immediately getting in the
Yeah,
queue
just
because the
like-
queue's been
Yes,
wiped, and they're like, yes, like people would like
They'll be-
kind of just
The hawk it,
stand by
yeah.
and watch, like
Yeah.
when you're working on the Godzilla. I think it was the Sega Godzilla or whatever. It was like as soon as the playfield went down, the glass went back in. Everyone was like,
in the queue.
get
In
in
the
that
queue.
queue.
Yeah. I can get 2
Yeah.
games in this hour instead of 1.
Yeah. That was Stars when I turned around from Stars after doing the drop target. And like the guy's like, is it good? I was like, yeah. He's like, sweet. And just like jumped straight into it. And I was like, all right, yeah, go get it, man. That was fun.
That's awesome. Do y'all want to tell the story about the flipper button not working too well on what EM was that?
It was
This is
8-ball.
the-
It was
The
8-ball
epic
champ.
switch building story.
Actually, I was going to see, does David have another one before he has to leave?
Oh, right, before you.
Because I know he has to leave early. So
I do not. I have
Oh.
about another 15 or 20 minutes with you guys, but I don't
Okay.
have anything pressing. Continue with the story.
The fireside chat.
So
Oh,
Matt,
I'm
if you want,
fine.
why don't you tell the
Yeah.
story from you started it? But I do have a visual for this. I don't know if this is gonna. Yeah, that'll work.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
that'll work. So yeah, we're over at the tech booth and someone comes over and says they're having a flipper problem on 8-ball champ. I believe it's 8-ball champ. And we're going over there and there's also an issue, I guess, on the game next to it. And Jay's going over to fix on that one. And Jay looks at us and goes, it's the flipper button. He like knows it. He's like, I know it's the flipper button. I was like, all right. So we kind of like check the state of the game. The guy's got it cradled and I go over and I hit the right flipper button a bunch and the flipper kind of goes up and every now and again, it's just kind of like limply, just kind of like falls. And it's like, oh no. So I look at the player and I'm like, well, I'm going to have to like turn the game off in order to like fix this situation. Like it's all high power shit. Like there's nothing I can really do with the game on. So you can either play it out the way it is or take a photo and then you get a comp ball when we're done trying to figure out what's going on here. The guy decides just to play it out. So I open it up after that and we're looking inside and sure enough, on the leaf spring, there's two pads that connect together to fire the flipper and one of them's gone. So it's just like a raw leaf. So there's David. Yeah. There's just like a raw leaf and then a pad on the other side. So there's not real, it's not making
like-
real good
My
solid.
autofocus is
connection.
not cooperating, but people should be hopefully be able to see pad on one leaf.
No pad.
See, there we go.
There you go. Yeah. So that the no pad side is just gonna like it'll make connection, but it's not gonna be good enough, like and solid enough to keep that flipper like nice and strong. So we look inside and we're like, well, do we have another one of these leaves? And Jay's like, I doubt it, dude. He's like, I don't know. Like, we can go dig around. And then David goes, I got it. I got an idea. Hold on a second. And he jams back to his kit and he comes over with this leaf spring that has all these holes in it. And it's like a build-a-switch like thing that he's got. And then David, I'll let you like roll with that.
Well, I'll go ahead and share a screen and with acknowledgement. We talked about this before. Of course, I'm going to have trouble. Let's see. Why isn't it just coming up the way I want it to? Okay, I'm going to do this. Sorry, this did not work the way I expected. Well,
so David has this.
You know what? I know what to do. I know what I'll do. Okay.
And apparently you can put the pad onto it wherever in one of these little holes to make it line up to the other switch. And you like put it in and then you have to like hammer it to like mushroom it out and make it so it like attaches to it. I
think you guys can see this. So I am showing a page from Pinball Resource on a Marco stream.
Oh, wait, hold on.
We
just
see it.
It's showing your desktop. That needs a little bit.
Is it not showing the right
up.
thing? No. Sorry. Let me get the right thing showing.
It needs to be cleaned up.
Let me get the right thing showing. No.
I can vouch
for some
for
reason
David's toolkit looking much neater than his desktop.
Yeah,
Can you do like share window?
100%.
Not share screen,
I know
but share window.
it's not. I'm trying and it's not showing me that. I've got too many things open, and it's very hard to find just this window. I'm trying to get it. Damn.
But yeah, Steve Young and Pinball Resource is a huge resource, no pun intended, to the pinball community as far as like keeping these older games especially running and nice, you know. We love Steve, and he's been a friend of the Marco family for 40 years, maybe even, you know. Everyone kind of in the community works together, and all the pinball parts companies, Pinball Life, Resource, Marco Specialties, we all work with each other and help each other keep parts in stock, and with the end goal of keeping pinball out of the landfills and all that good stuff. So he definitely has a lot of unique stuff on his website. He has a unique way of you ordering from him, which is endearing. And if you can make it through, then you can have some of the greatest parts you will need to keep your old EMs running.
Did I manage to sort of get it up?
Got it. You got it.
Okay, so on Pinball Resource, he sells blades for building a switch in light, medium, and heavy thickness. And I remember when I was first learning about this, I'm asking him, like, how am I supposed to know which one I need? And he goes, you're lucky. There were originally 7 different weights that Gottlieb used. So like for a flipper button, I think we were using heavy. And then you have to install a contact in it. And you've got sort of, let's see, these, in spite of the photo, these are the smaller ones and these are the larger ones. It doesn't quite look that way because of the way they photographed it. But, the smaller ones are used for a non-high current switch, but flipper buttons always get these larger tungsten contacts. So I install that. You kind of put this piece of it, the little nub, through one of the holes. You got to use a punch to mushroom it out. As usual, I screw up the first one, and then I've got to go do another one. I did have to do one of these yesterday, and because I had done one recently, I didn't screw it up. But yeah, these parts are something, they're small, so I can put them in my toolkit, and they don't take up a lot of space. I can carry them with me, and sure enough, we needed it.
So great. And then so I unsolder, like I pull the switch out, unsolder it, get the leaf out of the way. David runs back over with the new one, stick it right in, put it in, game fires up, plays great. we end up meeting back up over at the tech booth and shake hands, being like, "Pleasure working with you, sir." Like,
Yeah.
it was so cool. It was like so rad.
It was nice to have that be a collaboration because, you're prepping everything on one end and I'm prepping on the other end. And then when we come together, I mean, it took less than half the time it would have taken for one person to be able to get all those steps through. So
it was probably 5 minutes. Like it was very quick.
It was pretty quick. Yeah.
It was awesome.
A lot of repairs at the show are collaborative too, which is really helpful. So you just, one person, two people kind of IDing a problem and, maybe one person wrenching while another person, hands somebody something, and it just makes things go faster, and you kind of learn from each other too, which is great. So
I was helping David early, like I think we were doing a coil or something like that. And it was just like Jim looks at David and goes, "How fast can you replace a coil?" And he was like, "We got it." So I jam over and help him, and like I'm just sitting there handing him tools, holding the light. It's like that little bit is enough to like speed stuff up, and it's like just cool working as a team. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, that was switching games 5 minutes before we opened.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Because America's Most Haunted went on strike.
Oh,
yeah.
What happened with that? I do remember that now.
It kept blowing fuses, and we didn't have time to look at it, and I don't even know if Jim's got it fixed yet.
Yeah. So we pulled, what did we pull from the other side?
It was either Jackbot or Pinbot or something.
Jackbot.
It was Jackbot, yeah.
Jackbot. And then we had to go through Jackbot real quick and make sure it was all set up. Like literally as the show's doors are opening, we're like, "Oh, okay, get this thing right." And
Jim played a quick game, and he's like, "Change that coil and take that center post out."
Yeah. Oh yeah, and he's always like
change
the plunger link on the right flipper.
Yeah, he knew what part it was.
And it was like, dope, I got that. And I jam and grab the thing, undo it, and slam it together real quick, and played like fire ever after that. So good. So much fun.
It always amazes me how many hats Jim can wear at the same time during this event. I mean, he's helping run the event. He is teching. He is playing. I don't think any of you guys played, right? He's playing. He's qualifying. I mean, he's in there. He's holding his own.
He's Belsitoing.
And then his family shows up, and so he's also dad and family man, and he never seems to be phased. I just maybe you guys work with him more and you see it, and it's not worth bringing it up here. But
he's always chill.
It's just
he's always chill.
He's always chill and not aloof. I mean, he's chill and getting it done. It amazes me.
You were talking about like having the problem players where like some people get like a little, pissy or whatever, and it's like you just send Jim over to him, and it just like diffuses. He's just like able to just chill them all out. It's amazing. Like he's such a great tournament director. I've learned so much just on the tournament director side from him, let alone like tech stuff. That's just invaluable. It's like, oh my God, this guy is brilliant. And just how he keeps his demeanor the entire time. There was one moment when he was a little stressed out. I remember when like Jay and I got back and we were sitting at the booth and Jim comes over and he's like, "Now you guys are here." And we're like, "What?" He's like, "There's like 5 or 6 different things all happened at the same time while he's trying to play and qualify, and he had handled all of it, and there's nobody over at the thing for some reason at that moment." And then we both show up and he's like, "Great, now you guys are back. I see how it is."
So
frazzled.
In past years, I've often not been sort of hanging out with the techs. I was either in another room because we were dealing with COVID stuff, and I was like, "I'm not going to wear a mask for 3 days. Let me just call me in when you need me." And then later I would work on a side project, and I just wasn't hanging out. Once I started hanging out there's a ball sticking constantly. With 80 games.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how many balls did you guys unstick? And it's not even just technicians. I mean, there's other people helping with this, but I mean, nobody wants to shake the game because you have the opportunity to get the ball unstuck. Someone else is going to do it. But I mean, the times I got pulled over, even on like some more modern games, where you're just hoping like the the flipper's going to hold when you open the door and everything is still in place. It didn't affect it, but I did open one door where the interlock wasn't working anymore. The tape had come loose or whatever.
Mhm.
But I mean, the balls that I unstuck, they were not going to shake free. They were off the, I'll
Yeah.
say they're off the play field. They're out of play. They're not going to come back. And again, you're just trying to get in there and not hit anything else using probably a magnet tool. And then you got to get it on a flipper and put the glass back in and keep, have the player holding the flipper. But they've done this all before. I mean, they were great players just in terms of knowing what to expect. But a lot of times, you get to a game and I need an official to tell me that this is what we're going to do. I mean, I wasn't. You guys unstick more balls than I do in those games. I'm never really sure.
I imagine y'all's hearts are beating fast and palms sweating when doing stuff like that. Like there was a ball stuck in one of the high stakes games. I think it was the final battle between Escher and Arvid, and Kate was like walking over there with the magnet tool, and then she was like, wait a minute, I'm not doing this, and then handed it to Jim, like let this be Jim accidentally like sneezing at the wrong moment and hitting something you shouldn't have.
It doesn't even take.
It was like Arvid's ball 3. He's cradled up during multi-ball. He's got a ball stuck up in the top, and he's trying to battle his way back to like 3 billion or something like that. And she's like, no, I'm not doing this.
How many balls did y'all unstick over the weekend?
I can't count. So many.
I mean, who knows?
Handfuls.
50, 30.
It's pretty impossible to keep track. Unless we had a little talent.
I'm sure the total number is well into the hundreds, but I mean, I wouldn't know how many I did personally. I have no idea. I don't even remember half the things. I had to write things down so I could remember anything to talk about today.
Oh yeah, I forgot most of what I did.
Yeah, I just, I tried to sleep for 2 days and dump the memory, but
yeah. What else do you have written down, Jay?
Oh, do you want me to go through the list?
Yeah, let's go through it.
Okay.
You wrote them down. We want to hear them.
I did. So we've talked a bunch of stuff like Coindor, Guardians. A lot of problems with EOS switches, especially on the classics games, because the power runs through the cabinet switch and the EOS switch and the coil. Any EOS switch that's like it's slightly out of adjustment or a little dirty. Mostly it's adjustment problems. When they get played a lot, they just kind of move and then they don't close as securely, and then the flipper actually just doesn't work at all. So if you have a flipper not working at all, you can have a broken wire on the coil, which is pretty common, or the EOS switch just isn't touching appropriately. So we fixed a lot of that stuff. Sea Witch blew out a coil stop, which I don't think I've ever seen on a classic Stern. They're not riveted in. It's like press fit in, sort of like what Dave did with his with the flipper stack. So you have the bracket for the coil stop, and then you have the kind of the piece that protrudes that the plunger smashes into. The piece that protrudes that the plunger smashes into, it just completely came out. And it was an original coil stop. I mean, it's old. I could tell it was old. The other one in there is an original coil stop too. They just don't really wear out that much a lot of times, on those older games. So you can sometimes see the original parts. I mean, it's possible it was changed and just, it's like 30 years old, but it just like completely came apart. I've never seen that happen. So that happened. So that was a fun one. We had to, I didn't have a spare.
Oh,
I didn't have a spare.
I probably had that coil stop with me.
Did you?
I probably had it. Yeah.
For a classic Stern?
Yeah.
Okay. I bought
might have had that
just so I could put some back in my bins, but
oh, sure.
I took one from something else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember what.
Maybe.
No, because it would have been another Stern. Don't remember. But I got one that fit from something.
Okay.
Because I didn't have one that fit, and then we kept on moving. Another thing you can do on classic Sterns is they use the same coil stops on the pop bumpers. So if you really had to, you could take one off a pop bumper, and have a pop bumper that didn't work or whatever, and have the flippers work. But yeah, there's a coil stop on the big plastic Stern pop up a bracket, and it's the same as the flipper coil stop.
Whoa.
At least it fits the same. I can't vouch for 100% certainty that the actual measurements for the part that protrudes is the same depth, so it could change the flipper travel possibly, but I believe it's the same. I don't know why they would use two different parts for that, when they would work just fine being the same part. But anyway, so that's a thing. Let me see what else on the list. Oh, we broke 4 drop targets. Actually, Matt's got a great story for this one. He mentioned it to me like earlier.
I love
You
this
want to tell
story.
this one?
Like, yeah,
Okay.
I was over at
Real quick, guys, it's been a pleasure. I gotta
Thanks
go.
for hanging out with us
Absolutely.
today.
Work.
Thanks for all your
Bills gotta
help
get paid.
over the weekend, Dave.
Always. Have a great day, guys.
You
too,
See you
man.
next year at INDISC.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty attached at this point. So see you guys.
You did.
Sweet.
Yeah, I was over at Stars, and a drop target had broken, and so I go over to the booth, and I see Jim and Jay standing there, and I walk up, and I was like, "We need a drop target for Stars," and Jay's like, "Man, I just used my last drop target in another game." He's like, "I'll see what I can find," and Jim's like, "I'm gonna hit up whoever's at the shop, tell them to bring over the drop targets that we got there," and so kind of hanging out waiting, and then Jay shows up and he's got a drop target. He's like, "I found one," and hands it to Jim, and Jim's like, "Cool." He's like, "Yeah, you're gonna try to put this one in there?" Snap, and it just snaps like in half.
Yeah.
And Jay's like mouth just like falls open. He looks at me, and we both look at Jim, just like, "Bro, like, what are you
Oops.
doing?" And he chuckles, and he's like, "It wouldn't have lasted that long." Jay's like, "It
Exactly.
could have made it till Sunday, like maybe, like come
No,
on,
he's
man."
right. He's right. If they snap
Right.
in your hand, they wouldn't
Yeah,
last in the game.
It was
Yeah.
still just like the moment
It's
of
still
just
more
like,
fun to give him a hard time
and
about it,
then-
though.
yeah. And then as that happens, so he breaks it, right? And it's like, man, he's like, that was the last one. And then someone else walks up and goes, "We got a drop target broken on 9-ball." And Jay, we all look at each other like, we just broke our last one. We have 2 more down. It was so funny. And then sure enough, they show up with a bag of drop targets from the shop, and they lay them out, and Jay's looking down and he's like, Gottlieb, Bally, Gottlieb, Bally. Nope, none of these are gonna work. Like, so he looks at the tech and goes, "I need you to go back to the shop, and then I need you to pull the whole drop target bank out of Meteor. Pull all the drop targets out of Meteor and then bring those." And he was like, "All right, cool." And he like bails out, and I was like, "Whoa." I was like, "This is amazing." Sure enough, shows up, bag of drop targets. Jay looks at me and he's like, "How do you feel about doing a drop target?" I was like, "I'm on it, man." Like, grab his. He goes over to 9-ball. I go over to Stars. Within 10 minutes, we got it all up and running again, and it was awesome. But
I should point out that the shop is like 0.6 miles from the convention center, so it's not very
Still.
far to run over there. Yeah, so
yeah,
at
but
least
still,
I mean it
it's
helps.
like,
It's like
It's
you
convenient.
can we
yeah.
can actually do that. So not having everything necessarily on site doesn't mean we don't have access to parts pretty easily, which is really helpful.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
if someone's
that
holding
went
a flipper and holding a ball
Right,
on a
yeah,
flipper, you
Then
can't.
you're just like, no, there's no.
Yeah.
You're gonna wait while I run to the shop real quick and get the drop target.
It makes me wonder when I buy a used game and I see some sort of quick fix hacks like that, like a random drop target or something soldered directly onto like a test point versus inside a connector, or, any of the stuff you guys said, if it came from a tournament setting and that was done like in the field during
the moment.
a battle. Or
Probably
if it's
not.
just someone being like,
No.
I don't know, I'm
Probably
going to
not.
put it there.
Yeah,
Because
probably not.
sometimes I'm
It's
like,
someone who didn't have access to parts. They didn't even know, or it might have been at a time before it was as easy to get them.
well,
I
I mean, I don't
Right,
know.
right.
Because, like, now, say if Jim sold that Stars, it's going to have, like, the one drop target that's slightly different.
That it's gonna have
Yeah.
an O drop target and start.
Yeah, but if you think of all the pinball machines that are out there versus the ones that are used in tournaments, I think the
Yeah.
likelihood, almost any game, I see some sort of hack fix. And it used to bother me more. And I realized, especially working on older games, if you weren't plugged into an offline community, because there wasn't an online community, if you weren't plugged into some offline community, you did not know you could get parts, and maybe that you just couldn't.
Yeah.
So people made do. I try to be a little more forgiving now, but yeah, I'll rip all that stuff out, put in working good parts that are going to last a long time and be serviceable. That's also part of it. Someone, a hack fix isn't as easy to correct.
Some of and frankly, like I've probably learned more about doing this stuff over the years from repairing poor repairs than I have anything else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I've done some crazy stuff, like people wired in weird transformers and ran wiring all around games and, having to just back all of that out and, and figure out what the wiring is supposed to look like and then just put it all back. And the crazy thing was the one time I had to do that, I put it all back and it worked perfectly fine.
Oh my
Like
god.
everything that was in the game worked just like it was supposed to. Like there was like I don't know what problem, had it made, there was some issue but some very minor, super easy, to diagnose kind of like problem that was, like maybe a bad, bridge rectifier or something. It was just, but just like the game was, like, there's nothing really wrong with it other than this very, the most simple power supply fix, and somebody had just gone to all these lengths to rewire everything in this game to try and make it work and just made a mess. And yeah, so that but you learn so much from doing that kind of stuff. Like really, like that's how I got into this. Was I bought a game and I didn't want to have to pay somebody to fix it. Had a little bit of electronics knowledge from doing courses when I was younger in high school. I actually had vocational programs in electronics, so I learned all big basic Ohm's law stuff then, and then would tinker with my own stuff off and on until I got a pinball machine. It's like I don't want to have to, I need to know how to fix this because it's gonna break, right? And so when it did, I just started fixing it myself and asking for help, and then buying another project and then learning on my own. And yeah, so that stuff is great. Like it seems like it's not, but it really is. If you want to fix pinball machines, having games that other people kind of butchered, to use a not very kind word, is an amazing way to learn.
Well, that's what you found, Emoto, like when you were looking through Future Spa. Future Spa? I think it's Future Spa.
Oh, Future Spa with the rectifier board? Mm-hmm. Yes, it's funny. It was Daniel Spohler's Future Spa, but it was sitting at Jim's house. So I guess that's where my example came from, because it was kind of like maybe this was done by Jim during a crazy tournament, and that's why this hack job exists. But basically, it was like that. The game wasn't powering up at all. It wasn't booting up right before we were about to do our monthly. So we opened it up, looked at the rectifier board to see if any of the fuses were blown or anything. But then I noticed there was a connector that was just, what was it like? It was just floating.
You had a wire.
A wire floating. Then looking at the schematics, I was like, okay, that blue wire is supposed to go in connector 4, J4, or whatever. But it was like there was no trifurcon or anything in that slot for that J4 connector. So I'm looking at it, and then of course this was the time too that I let one of my customers who is getting into pinball and working on a project game, an Alien Poker, I gave him all my crimper and tools and everything, so he had that at his house. So anyways, I'm like, okay, I have this one wire, I shove it into the connector and it works or whatever, but then I noticed that test point 2 or something had a bunch of solder gunk on it. And then so Matthew was like, oh, just put it up to that. So I took that wire and I put it up to the test point, and then the game just fired on perfectly. So it was just okay. So I got my iron and just soldered it back onto that test point and buttoned it up, and we're like, we're going to play this game now. And it worked fine, and it still works to this day. I need to go in there and
until you need to pull the board for some other reason.
But it was just someone at some point had this thing ripped out and then determined that the best solution was putting it on that test point to get it to keep working. If you look at the board, the rectifier board needs to be completely repinned because it does look burnt and everything on the actual board. So maybe it was just not working, and they just pulled it out, and I don't know how or why, but I was like, oh, maybe that was like a quick
I've definitely seen that repair before
fix.
also. Yeah. And probably multiple wires soldered to the test points instead of just one.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that was a
Soldered
thing
directly to
until
the
I saw the
pins.
hacks.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah, I've
made
seen
me
them soldered.
learn about test points more. I mean, like, besides using them when you're like trying to check things, but that it could be a band-aid at some points to get the power running. Not the best thing to do, but it's interesting. It's always like one of those things, like being new to pinball repair. When I'm looking at something, I may not know, or I usually don't know, like, if it looks wrong. So taking pictures and sending it to like tech friends, or putting it on, pinball enthusiasts or repair forums, and being like, something's not working right here. I can't figure it out. And then people instantly are like, oh, that diode on that coil is installed backwards. Or, you know what I mean? I didn't do that, but just as an example of like what you guys, you have so many years of skills, and you've seen it all and know what pinball is supposed to look properly, but then just having those kind of professional eyes, so to speak, to determine that, versus like I could be looking at this coil and being like, I don't understand why this isn't working, and it's just as simple as like, oh, that gray line is facing that way instead of that way. And it's just
I had one.
amazing what y'all do, and it's fun to learn. Like it's super exciting, like diving deep into this world. Like what keeps y'all constantly like running INDISC now for over a decade and working in these kind of like high stress fix it environments? Like what is it about that y'all love and keeps you coming back for more war stories and in the trenches?
I mean, you touched on it there. It's a really different environment than when you're working on games otherwise. There is this stress and this tension and this time and sort of the collaboration and the group setting, and you've got people who are waiting on you, but they've come to know who you are, and so they're kind of being patient. That whole, it's weird. It's like, am I sick to my stomach or am I energized by this? And it's kind of both. And each repair is sort of this great relief, and then you realize, oh, there's just another one waiting now. That first day, I mean, my workload on EMs is going to be different than these other guys, but I mean, that first Thursday, it was just seemed nonstop, and then it got into sort of more of a manageable rhythm. But that, I don't know, it's just it's a different kind of environment, and I guess I've gotten to like it, though it's painful. I don't know if I should admit that, but
I really enjoy the team portion of it, like the team effort portion of it, and like being involved with the group of people keeping this whole thing going. Even though this is like my second INDISC, but working with Jay and with Jim and with David, and it's fun. Yes, it's a little stressful, and you're trying to keep these things all running, but you have this support group behind you that are all in, being like, you got it? I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I'm like, all right, great. And then at the end of it, being able to say that we didn't lose like a game in open, really. Like everything qualified, nothing got pulled out and had to be replayed or anything like that, is amazing. Like that's just such a like feather in the cap type feeling of like, nah, we didn't lose shit. Like this is great. It is a higher stress environment, but to work with these guys on this level, it just seemed not as stressful. Like to have those people behind you being like, no, you're good. Like it's awesome. So
it's fun working in that fast-paced problem-solving environment.
Yeah. Get your, and then like David said, like you fix something and you're just like endorphin, like yeah, let's go.
What
I
about
think
you,
just
Jay? What drives you?
it's well, I mean, on the tech side, it's definitely, I mean, obviously, it's no different than what's already been said. Just like kind of the rush of like getting the job done, and I think sometimes it's hard. It's almost harder when you're not under pressure to get something fixed. Like there's a there's definitely a level of intensity that can cause you to sort of focus and bring out the best. And so you might have a problem that you wouldn't be able to solve because you'd be more relaxed and you're just not thinking like as quickly or as sharply, and you might put it aside. But when you're under the crunch, you just you find a way. And I think you know you learn from that stuff. Again, it's like, and that's sort of the other thing. It's like just getting better at this. The more stuff that gets thrown at me at these events, the more I just know what's wrong with a game without thinking as much too.
Mm.
So you just you at some point, most of the time, I mean, it probably, 3 out of 4 times when somebody comes up to the tech table and tell me there's a problem on a certain game, I'm gonna walk up to it and just know what it is before I get there. And that's a lot of that comes from the experience of having done this for a bunch of years now and just being like, just seeing the same things over and over again, right? Like, and so, you just learn. And then, and obviously having David Volansky and around as well with his electromechanical experiences, I'm learning from him at events
Yeah.
and when he's here leading up to events. So that helps me be better, and learning even and the EM stuff helps me get better at the solid state stuff too. It's like, it's just, it all kind of, you know, um, is just, you know, piling information into the brain that, to be recalled at some point later, so it's fun. And I really enjoy personally. I'm a very collaborative person. I don't like working alone particularly. I like working with people and and doing things as a group, and that's one of the reasons I probably got involved in INDISC in the first place, is just kind of to learn from Jim and Carl to a large degree, and just to kind of be involved in something that I thought was really cool. And then, now as, during the event, doing all the tech stuff, I'm, learning stuff from Matt and, even David, Dave Hill he brought the fix for the diode thing, what he found, and it's just like, I might not have seen that. I don't know. Like, it's just, so it's really cool to like, just have all the other people that we're working with and learning from, and working together, and we're doing a job as a pair, or we're doing a job on our own, or we're sharing the story about the thing that we just fixed by ourselves, or
Mm-hmm.
or with the other David, or with Matt, or, or whatever, or Matt and David fix something and they're telling me, and so we're it's just like, that's cool. And and obviously, and then we have our other techs who are helping, uh and they have stuff that they can share with us. So um, yeah, that's probably it.
Super fun. Did we cover all the main stories and memories from INDISC that y'all
Oh gosh, I
want
had
to
a couple.
get?
I had a
I
couple
mean,
more,
I had
but
one, though. I'm going to use it more as a teaser for a future episode that'll
Okay.
go very deep. Um, but this one actually starts at an earlier tournament. Um, I was working Worlds at Jim's place. When was it? It was in 2024 sometime. I don't remember when I was there. But Lucky Hand, which is the Add-a-Ball version of Jack's Open that people are probably more familiar with on this coast, it a player I know witnessed another player who was playing against it. He witnessed it doing something very strange, which gave a huge advantage to the player. And again, I'm not going to get into all the details today because it's probably its own presentation. I'll be
Yeah, let's
writing it
hear
all
it
up
when
and
you're
everything.
ready.
But I pull out the schematic because I'd like this. The game can't do that. It's just not designed to do that. And I look at the schematic and I'm like, I think maybe there was like a design flaw in this game. And really, in 1977, who cared? I don't know that there were competitions going on like that. On location, okay, someone's going to win a bunch of games or get a bunch of points, but it like who would care that this flaw existed? Well, and I looked at it and it was like a weird timing thing. I'm like, this is a 1 in a million thing. It's not going to happen again. Then it happens again during Worlds. And it's the same player watching a different competitor now. And now it's in finals. And I'm like, okay, I can't believe this is happening, but I can see why. And I couldn't exactly reproduce it yet, but I mean, it was taken out of Worlds. They stopped using it for the day or the rest of that tournament. And I went, once I had time, I went about and I was able to recreate the problem with my fingers on the playfield. I started under the playfield, but hitting relays, but I had to do it on the playfield. And I want to recreate it on another game. But in the meantime, I also studied the schematic, really wanted to understand this problem, why it was unique to Lucky Hand, and that's true. And then I had a theorized workaround. I essentially, two things were conflicting on their timing of the motor, and it's I can pull the schematic up, but again, I think we could get into like an hour of discussion that I don't want to do. So I had a workaround that I had already written up. I've only looked at a schematic, and so now I've got Jim's game and I've opened it. First of all, I recreate the problem. All right, okay, this is definitely what I remember. With about a foot of wire, I'm able to rewire up the game neatly. It's all in the bundle and everything. And I've changed this behavior. And the way I changed it, I mean, there's no sense in trying to recreate it. It can't happen. I'm just worried about another conflict, and there wasn't another conflict. The game got a test. So that was kind of a big success. Now I just need to make sure it's not just Jim's lucky hand. I'm almost certain it's not just Jim's lucky hand. Right. But I have access to one other. I need to recreate the problem, and then I'll finish writing it up and the fix. Now, again, outside of a tournament setting, I don't know that anybody really cares or would bother. Right. But it was make or break for this. I mean, suddenly a player in hitting a drop target can get 50,000 points, which for a casual player is a whole game.
Yeah.
So these are competitive players. They're getting higher scores than that, but suddenly, like, there's a lot of 50,000 points to collect. It was just ridiculous. And I did have one player who was at Worlds who remembers this, who was not involved in the play that was happening. He said, yeah, I remember the scores put up on Lucky Hand were higher at Worlds. And he thinks that problem was happening more often than it got caught. Whoa. And the scores were more in line at this event. So that was a big one for me, and I'm looking forward to sharing the details at some point.
We should make it a whole episode.
I'll work with you, Emoto, either as a PinTech live or it'll be a presentation at the show, and we'll record it and put it out. But I did the fix on Wednesday before the tournament, and it did not cause any problems, which I feel pretty good about.
Nice.
That's amazing. Yeah, how to make your EMs tournament ready by changing the rules.
The rules.
Basically.
This isn't even changing the rules. This is I essentially had to change the timing of when which motor switches make something happen so that it doesn't happen at the same time as something else. Again, I'll use it as a teaser for a deeper conversation, but I'll have schematics all marked up with weird paths, and yeah,
that'll be a fun one for sure. Jay, you said you had a few more notes, or?
Oh, there's a couple more things. Quickly, I'll remind everybody how janky the stand-up targets in Sega games are. Those molded plastic ones that break all the time, and then the connectors that are all that fail, and so you have to try and repin them with parts that you can't really get anymore, and required. So you have to modify if you put a new one in, and you want to put a new connector in that uses D pins instead of the insulation displacement. You have to kind of slightly modify the mount for the connector, but you can do it. And it all works, and it works much better. But
are you mostly doing that as prep? or are you having to do that during
no, we had just had one fail on on Segazilla. We lost a taxi target, and
Oh,
then
jeez.
just in replacing the one taxi target, a wire comes out of the connector for one next to it. Just falls out of the IDC connector because that's what happens with IDC
Yeah.
connectors, and these are all
Yeah.
daisy chained together, right next to each other, and so just removing one, but so we're repinning two and then replacing a target with one that works. Yeah, so that happened, and then the other kind of interesting one is this is a problem with like old star inserts, star rollovers that get blown out. The inlane rollover on Deadly Weapon, which is a Gottlieb from the late 80s. Really fun game, not too common. It actually has kind of a similar sort of left flipper arrangement as the new Stern X-Men does with the little kind of curly cue. But there's a star rollover in that lane, and that was having problems, and somebody finally comes and gets me to look at it. I didn't really know that it was having problems, but apparently it had been for a while. So when I go look at it, the bottom side, so the star clips into the actual insert, and there's like I'm gonna try and do there's like a 4-pronged sort of fork, and then the star roller pokes through it and like can go up and down, but it can't go out, right? Because the prongs kind of prevent it from going backwards. But those prongs break off, and then the rollover doesn't sit in the insert properly. It's, I guess technically it would be like down, but the rollover then can kind of get sideways because those prongs aren't there holding it into straight up and down position. And so the fix for that was break all the prongs off the bottom of the underside because it's already busted anyway. There's nothing you can do about it. And then take a mini post rubber, like just the smallest, black or white rubber, stick it on, and on the plastic insert, the actual white piece that sits in the insert, and then you'll have to adjust the leaf switch that kind of to tension it a little bit further, so that you're using some of the tension from the leaf switch to kind of bounce it up and down, because it's not really sitting. It will still not be super well aligned, and it can move a little bit in the insert, but if you can get it adjusted reasonably well, it will get you through a tournament, worst case scenario, and it may work perfectly fine for as long as the rubber holds up, best case scenario. So there's not much else to do other than replace the actual whole insert, which is totally doable, but they don't always come out so easy
during a tournament. You're not doing that.
And I don't have spares for that, right? And I can glue a new insert in, but like getting it out without damaging the playfield or making a mess is not always guaranteed. So some inserts come out easier than others. Gottlieb's, I've never really noticed that Gottlieb's have loose inserts very often. So an old Bally like Paragon, I probably pop one out with my finger.
Yeah,
most of the time, if
Yeah.
you just push on a little bit, the insert will just pop out. And I've re-glued dozens of inserts on games before. I've even re-cleared a playfield and sanded it flat. So my future spy did the whole playfield, and it's like
nice.
I filled all the inserts, which was just an incredible amount of time and effort to do that. But I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't recommend doing it, but it's doable. But yeah, like it's but I don't know if I've ever poked an insert out of a Gottlieb like that. I'm not sure what would happen. So yeah, it's sometimes they even have Mylar, too, like. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that was a fix. That was the only other thing I had on my list, and that was kind of one of the more esoteric kind of like, well, we got to get this working because it's basically unplayable, and it's a kind of an important roller because it lights a spinner and when the switch works. So
that's a fun
that's pretty much
one more.
Pretty much it for me.
Was
You got one more?
The Elton John zip tie fix that you came up with.
Oh,
and it's like,
I
it
know.
was
Do
like,
you have a picture of that? That was like the cleanest.
I do. Like,
something so
and
simple,
so
but it was so clean.
The connector.
Remember, you can hold it up to the camera.
Yeah, let's see if I can find it.
Jay doesn't even remember. He's like, "What did I do?"
I do now. Yeah, I was like, I was trying to think about like zip tie. Like, what are we talking about? I don't even remember working on Elton John.
I haven't seen this, but I've heard about this.
Yeah,
I didn't hear about a zip tie. I just heard there was something with lights on Elton John that kept getting discussed.
The center section of lights where like the drop targets are, and they have like the I think it's 9 lights, and then there's also the lock shot. Jersey Jack was using USB-C, I guess
I
during
did hear about this.
COVID and everything, and so they moved away from the like.
But so the USB-C kept pulling out
Pulling out
from the
of it,
rattling
yeah.
and stuff, as USB-C does.
Right. Yeah, the
There
USB-C
it is.
connectors are not as robust. They don't
Yeah.
really lock in the same.
And so Dave was like, maybe if you put like 2 screws, like 2 big flathead screws in there, and that'll like just hold it from doing it. And the thing that Jay said, you said this is like so wonderful to me. You're like, I would like something a bit more elegant. And I was like, yeah. And I don't know if we can get it, but
Bring it up a lot closer. You might have to hit the exposure. Oh,
so
Zoom in on it.
That's the zip tie.
we wanna
And
see.
you ended up having to like cut 2 screws too, because we didn't have the actual like length screws
Oh, I see.
into it. So like that black line that's going vertical, there's like Jay takes screws and he cuts the ends off the screws, and then he tacks holes through the zip tie and just gets it in there to zip it onto the play field, and then make it so that connector didn't come off. And it
It
very
looks factory.
elegant. Yeah,
And if
so good.
And if you need to take the plug out, you just unscrew one of the screws, and it's
And just unplug
so
it.
it's a good permanent fix. Oh, I like it.
It was really, really cool. And just but that line that you said, I was hoping for something a bit more elegant. And then you came up with this. Just cut a zip tie, you could put a couple holes in it.
Something Elton John would approve of, you know?
Right. Much more elegant, less hack.
The bad news is we kept having problems with other USB-C connectors in the game, and just the lights were staying on at that point, so that was the kind of problem with that one. When coming out, the lights were going off, but there was another USB-C connector that was jiggling a little bit. I'm not sure. Somebody else I think Jim ended up figuring out where it was and
oh, cool,
getting it going, but it made it through finals. But
that
just
was
all the play, the USB-C connector comes out, and then you get a notice on the monitor. Like the game will keep working because it's not disconnecting permanently. It's just kind of it's just wiggling enough to to kind of not be seated for a second, and then it throws an error, and then the error shows up on the big LCD screen in the back box, and then it goes away, and then it shows up again, and it goes away, and it shows up again. And so if you're trying to follow your progress, using the display, it's basically covered by an error message, even though the game is still working and everything on the playfield is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and all the scores are scoring appropriately because the plugs aren't really staying undone for enough time.
Do you guys think stuff like that is seen at INDISC because these games get played so hard for so long? I mean, they're not just played hard. I mean, they're hot. They're warmer than they're going to be. I mean, even if you have a game that's played a lot on location, it has a rest period. These games, they rest overnight, but there's no rest. They are played continuously.
13 hours of continuous play.
Yeah.
By players who are playing them hard, like deep into them, and like trying. It's like it's not.
I mean, Jay, the flipper coil on Blue Chip that wasn't completely burnt up.
I forgot about that.
But overheated enough that the plunger was sticking with the flipper partway up or all the way up. But I think we ended up using that coil later when it had cooled off. It was okay.
It cooled off and it still worked, and then it overheated again about a day later. And then I ended up replacing the coil at that point because it got too hot. And I think my only hunch as to what caused that was because I filed the cabinet switch because they were kind of pitted.
Oh yeah.
Is that maybe there was enough dust down, and this is something I'd seen in the past, and so I try and if I file a flipper cabinet switch, I always make sure I get the metal dust out from between the leaves because it can basically close the flipper. It's like the carbon on the board. It can basically close the flipper like through conducting between the leaves across the stack. So you have to clean it out. And I did that, but it's not foolproof. I couldn't find any other reason why the coil would lock on. I mean, it's just an EM. There's no real there's your flipper switch, your EO switch, and power, and there's not anything else that caused it to be activated other than the switch being closed. So I think that's probably what was going on. So I cleaned it out again, and we replaced the coil and didn't have any problems for the rest of the event. But yeah, it's yeah, the stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah,
man.
I just the games get played differently. I mean,
They do,
even
yeah.
I mean, I working at the museum. I mean, the games get played hard there, but not like this.
Yeah,
This is
different.
I mean, especially in the open, they're in that lineup. They're just played continuously for 4 days. Well, 3 days at least during qualifying. Yeah.
Yeah, they get a break for the scorekeeper to come record the score. That's pretty much
Yeah,
it.
that's about
Or
it.
when they break.
Or when
Well,
they
But
just, I've
now
had
that
enough,
there
man. I
was
need a half an hour.
Scorebit integrated, it was it's literally
It's
just like
faster, yeah. It takes
looking
less
at
time,
it
yeah.
and pushing the enter button and they're good to go. So it didn't get a normal break of like waiting for a DMD to cycle or whatever, because you can't hit the flipper button on the side to see the scores pop up. Now
Right.
it's just instant. But that's awesome. All right, y'all. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with us. I guess to leave the stream, what's like the one thing you took away from INDISC 2025?
One thing.
I have to go get the door. You guys talk for a second.
He's like,
Oh, I was gonna
"Yes."
prime Jay with a good story. We'll get till he gets back.
Yeah.
Well, I can hear you still.
All right.
Hello.
Jay walked away with a puzzle that was mine.
Oh, puzzle
So
story.
this is,
That's good.
I don't know if you've heard this story.
No,
So
I've heard that.
there are people who bring and make jigsaw puzzles while they're waiting to play games.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of jigsaw puzzles, and I would always think I should just bring some for them because they always finish them early. They're traveling, so they're not bringing a bunch with them. Sometimes they buy them locally. So I completely forgot about that. A friend of mine had just returned 2 puzzles to me, and I thought, oh, I'll just bring these to INDISC. No brainer. And one of them, I was not sure I was going to bring it. It kind of ties in with a collection of puzzles I like to keep. But I thought, oh, you know what? I'm just going to bring it. It'll be fine. We've had things get spilled on puzzles there, and it's not a priority, right? So no one's really worried about the puzzle, but I decided to bring it. They never even get around to making that particular puzzle. And then on Sunday, I see Jay walking around with it under his arm. Now, Jay, I think you were trying to find them because you thought they forgot it or something.
Yes.
That's how I'll tell the
And
story.
I wanted to know. I wanted to make sure that if they had left it behind,
Right.
I was going to take it home with me. But I didn't want to take it not knowing whose it was. So I was trying to figure out whose it was that left it.
So it's so
Basically,
strange.
yeah.
I'm sitting in a part of the room I haven't sat in all weekend. So I'm sitting in the right place, and I see Jay walking by with my puzzle under his arm. And I'm like, hey, that's mine. And we start talking, and it turns out he's been looking for this puzzle. It completes a different collection that he has. And he's telling me like how much it's valued at online. I'm like, Jay, it's yours.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
I know how much a weird random Springbok puzzle is worth.
It's and it didn't it's
And old pinballs.
Yeah, but man, that I feel so good about that. It was just the freak happenstance that even got it there, and then that I saw Jay walking with it. This was so meant to be. So
Serendipity.
if you're
Yeah,
what did
so
we
good.
leave with? Jay left with my puzzle, and
Indeed.
I left with a good story, and I'm very heartwarmed by it. Gosh, I'm trying to think of other. I've shared my stories.
No, that's a great one.
I
know,
left
you
with
guys have-
feeling very good about working with y'all. Like, I had a lot of people come up to me and thank me personally, and that felt really good. Players and scorekeepers, and it was just really cool. Another really good year, really cool experience, and I want to definitely be a part of it again next year because it's too good a
Awesome.
time. It's too good a time.
I
I
got
left
some
with the puzzle.
T-shirts.
Yeah, I know we didn't.
I know that's not really what you were trying to ask, but
Oh,
No,
yeah,
no, no.
Yeah, we got
It's
t-shirts.
like, yeah,
yeah.
what's the one
I-
memory that's gonna stick with you from the leaving the show or something you learned or whatever? But I love the puzzle story. And yeah, it's always fun learning from y'all. And thank you for letting us stick the camera in y'all's faces all weekend long.
That was so rad.
I
think
did have to send
was
you
our
away
best
once.
show ever. Like when we stopped streaming on Thursday, it was just like this big high five moment of like, that was the coolest content we ever recorded. And we were just roaming around with the iPhone so we could get the shots, and just following y'all every time you opened up a game and like, okay, what's going on here? What are you working on? And then watching y'all fix it in real time while everyone is standing around you and stuff. It was like the most cool, like live action pinball repair experience ever. And it's very daunting to not only fix a game that a bunch of people are watching you, but now you have a camera and a light and a mic in your face, and you guys are still being super awesome and patient with us about it. So thank you so much, and I hope we can continue to do that in future years, because that was like the most fun ever.
Yeah, to be honest, I barely even noticed.
Oh wow, good.
I just too, you're just like too busy trying to do the thing,
Yeah.
to be
I do
bothered by
remember
that.
having to tell Emoto to turn it off at one point. I was just I was reading a schematic and talking to someone. I wasn't in the moment. It wasn't a current repair, but I was. It was actually the Lucky Hand thing. I was explaining.
Yeah,
it
you're
to
trying to
someone else,
focus on. Yeah.
and I'm trying to look at the schematic and show, and like I'm just trying to think, and I couldn't think with a camera in my face.
Yeah.
Even a phone. It was just like, this isn't working. I feel bad, but I think you totally understood. It was like
totally cool.
it wasn't working. But then, yeah, the other times, sometimes I was aware you were watching. I probably wasn't always aware.
There was one, Emoto had told me about this. And so when I was running around with the phone during the stream, I saw you working in the women's group on the far end. It was like the ball wasn't kicking out into the shooter lane or something. Argosy. So I walk up and say, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm doing this. It's not doing that. This is what I've checked already. And this is what I'm working on now. I'm like, cool. Keep going. And I just ran away, and I was like, I don't want to bug him. I want him to be able to work and like not have a camera shoved in his face. But I got the moment of like, it's all taken apart and you're like working on stuff. And it was cool to be like, yeah, there's that happening. Okay, we're going to leave David alone. Okay, we're on around the other side. Go stick a camera in Jay's face. He doesn't care.
I remembered Argosy was there. I remembered I worked on it, but I couldn't remember what the job was. It was just like a gummed up kicker.
Yeah.
And so it was like disassemble the kicker, clean it, grease it, put it back together, and suddenly it was like the ball was having trouble getting to the shooter lane, and that quick 2-minute servicing made it really jump. So yeah, I hope you caught it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that was fun.
What are you going to remember from this INDISC 25, Jay?
Me?
Yeah.
Being tired is usually what I remember for the longest amount of time. It's honestly like the first year we were at the convention center was the hardest I'd ever worked in my life for probably 4 or 5 days, or 6 or 7 days, really. And every year it's gotten even harder. I would say, more games, more stuff, and this year is no exception. It's just harder and harder. So if anybody out there thinks that this is something they want to get involved in, we can always use more help. If you're good at working on pinball machines and you're interested in being involved, let someone know, and have a moto or can put you in touch with us, and we can talk about how we can make that happen for next year. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we can use more help.
Build the tech.
And we get it done, and the team we have is great, but man, it's just so much work. So yeah, and this is a great opportunity to learn and meet people, and yeah. So
imagine if we had enough techs, Jay, that every game could get opened up and every switch could get tested before we started, or just stuff like that. It'd be crazy.
Or I could,
that'd be cool.
Take a break.
Or Jay just sits there and he you go there, you go over there.
That would be nice too.
Master Tech it. Awesome. So we did have one question in the chat. By the way, the chat's been super awesome. Lots of thank yous from players that popped in over the weekend. Jermaine was hanging out. Neon
I even got a
Reds
text
Pinball,
message
shout
from
out to
someone who's
them.
watching.
You know, but we did have one last quick tech tip question from Brooklyn Pin asking y'all, what's the best way to remove Mylar from a modern Stern game? What's y'all's technique to remove Mylar from a modern Stern?
Anyone? I've got one if nobody else
I
does.
don't. I do not.
I
mean, it's
asked someone else to do
freeze.
it.
Yeah, freeze spray.
Freeze spray.
Freeze
spray?
Yeah, you freeze it. You hold a can of or you basically a can of air upside down, releases all the propellant, and it'll freeze the you'll see it kind of freeze on the play field, and that cold will separate the adhesive from the Mylar. So what you'll end up with is the Mylar peeled off and the adhesive left on the playfield. But the adhesive is, you can take the adhesive off using, orange oil, goo. Not you don't want to use goof off, but like Goo Gone, I think is the orange oil one. It will, eventually get it done. There's some other tricks to removing adhesive. I actually have on my cart for restorations. I removed Mylar from my entire future spot. I took all the Mylar off before I did the insert fix, and so you can use flour. It makes a mess, but it's actually less messy than just cleaning off the adhesive. But you use flour and orange oil, and you can kind of rub the flour around, into the oil, and it'll basically make goops of the playfield of the adhesive that's left behind after you get the Mylar off. And you'll still have some, that you'll have to keep cleaning off. I mean, you basically just have to keep going at it until
You ever do
really get
lighter
it all
fluid?
off. But
Lighter fluid?
I think orange oil works better than lighter fluid,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah, that probably works. I have some. I've used it to clean rubber sometimes, but naphtha, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are in California where you
smells
can't get
worse.
it anymore, but
And it smells worse.
yeah.
I'll smuggle some in from Alabama to all y'all.
Oh yeah.
Your Christmas gifts.
Please, yeah.
Oh,
I'll use
naphtha.
a bottle of naphtha. It's good to have on hand for just the
That's
thing that you need it for.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Freeze it. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, you should be able to find instructions for how to do that if you do a search. Because I know I learned that from somebody probably posting somewhere. This is how they did it, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I tried it. It works fine.
So thinking about it further, how do you think someone could practice that? Because you don't really want to practice and try it your first time on a game.
Right.
Well,
So
I
maybe
mean,
you get like a scrap playfield and put some Mylar on it, or would that not
there's
give you
not. I mean, you can't. Well,
You're not
you
gonna
wouldn't
hurt
want
it?
to practice it on a giant Mylar, right? It's the kind of thing like, oh, there's this Mylar on just like a pump up a ring, Mylar maybe, or there's a Mylar that's at where the ball drops by the ramp, just like a little square
So
one.
you think the freezing isn't going to hurt the playfield? That's
Oh no.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, like
okay.
worst case, it doesn't come off, and you wipe off the water, and I mean, that's
Okay.
just, and then it's clean, right? Like so you can kind of mess around with it until like obviously the Mylar is going to come up. And and if you want to practice on a spot, you practice on the small one before you start trying to take off a whole piece of Mylar. And you have to do it, if you have a big piece of Mylar, you're going to do a little bit at a time. You freeze a little bit, it'll kind of peel up, and then you freeze a little bit, it'll kind of peel up, and then you just do that until it's all up. Another one I had a fishtails with a playfield overlay on it that got worn out. And it was last year sometime, and I used freeze spray to get that all off, and then took the adhesive up, and then redid it. So, yeah, that's how I would do that. It's not a super technical process. It just kind of, you freeze it, it peels a little bit, you freeze it some more, it peels a little bit. So starting on a small piece that you might try it on a game, might be a good way to just kind of get an idea for how this is going to work. But you could also hold the can upside down, can of air upside down, spray it on your desk, watch what happens, and go, okay, that's how that works. Now I know where to kind of point it.
Nice.
Yes.
Look what I have.
stuff.
This
Now you can
it's
do
that
it
close
after
to
the
me. Yeah, it just happens to be in my office.
And you can actually buy freeze
empty, I think.
spray. That's basically the same thing as a can of like freeze spray. It's
So do you take the plastic, the red
No.
piece off?
no,
So
I would leave it
you're doing upside down and
Yep.
through the red piece. Okay.
Yeah, but I would actually leave it kind of,
Sideways.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't tilt it too much because you want the pellet to come out. That's what's happening when you turn it upside down. is my understanding anyway. Maybe technically incorrect.
So
but...
not this way, but maybe like this.
No, more up, more like upside down. Like turn the can.
Oh, like this. Yeah.
Yeah, not
This
Oh,
is
not too
upside
straight
angled
up
though.
and
I would go
down.
more straight up and down. Yeah, a little more
Oh,
like that
and
than
then maybe
angled too much.
maybe
Yeah, I
angle
don't know. You
this.
need to bend the
You can do
rod.
that.
You can angle it a little bit, but you want to keep it relatively perpendicular and kind of just put the nozzle close to where you want the spray to come out, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Nice.
you can buy a freeze spray in a can, and then you don't turn it upside down, and that's used for electronics troubleshooting typically. Like if you're, you have a part that you think is getting hot, and you're not, you can spray freeze spray on it, and if it cools off, and then your fault goes away until the part gets hot again, and you've maybe identified that that's a fail point. But it's also pretty easy to just turn the can of air upside down, and canned air is probably cheaper than actual freeze spray.
Yeah, I imagine. Nice. Cool pro tip. Awesome.
And probably easier to find. It's at home
Probably,
Office
yeah.
Depot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I hope to see
Sure.
all of y'all at Golden State Pinball Festival in May. Maybe we can get Jay to come up there for it.
Yeah.
Y'all
come
two can
camp
work
with
on
us.
convincing him. It would be really cool to do like a run of our technician game show idea we were all throwing around at the end of the show.
I think it's a pretty fun idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
more
pretty rad.
info on that to come, but just having fun with the tech. So. All right, for everyone else, we will see you guys next week. We'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary in pinball for Marco Pinball, which is insane.
It's amazing.
1985. And we'll be doing some pin score installs and hanging out in Paradise and all that good stuff. So until next time, see you guys later. All right, wave
Bye.
goodbye, y'all. Wave goodbye.